ESBR Boxing. You join myself and my esteemed colleague, Mr. Paul Kelly. I was going to say Dr. Paul Kelly there. In many ways, he is a doctor of boxing, but we're going to go through another week, another weekly preview. Join us here again. Three fights to talk about today on different days, actually. So there's boxing every single day of the weekend, essentially, next week. We're going to start with an event on the Friday, then on the Saturday and the Sunday. Paul's going to take us through the first two, and I'm going to take us through the last one on the Day of the Lord himself, taking place on Sunday. So we're going to go, Paul, we're going to start with you first on Friday. And I'm not going to give the names of the fighters, but I'm just going to let everyone know here that we're going over to the US, to Orlando, to the Caribe Royal Orlando Hotel, or in Orlando somewhere for this fight. So, Paul, please take it away, please.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Cheers for that introduction. As you say, three fights this weekend coming, 3 different days, 3 different cards, three good fights, I think, as well. But yeah, the first one probably the least recognizable in terms of names, to our audience here. But you know, when you have a look at it, it's a decent enough fight, as you said, Orlando, Florida. 10 rounder, bantamweight division, and it's a fight between Antonio Vargas and Michel Banquez. Now, quick tail of the tape as always customary. Vargas is 15-1 with 8 stoppage victories, 26 years old. He's an orthodox fighter from the US, 5'5.5" with a 66-inch reach. Looking at his opponent, Michel Banquez, he's 20-2 with 14 stoppage victories. He's 6 years older, 32. Also an orthodox fighter, 5'5.5", so the same height, and is a little bit longer of a reach at 67.5 inches. He's from Venezuela. So, yeah, this fight kind of caught my eye when we were discussing what fights to do because, you know, Banquez, neither of these two are big names, but Banquez won the IBO bantamweight title, beating the certain British Prince Patel back in 2019. Obviously a name that people find quite funny in boxing circles, especially Sonny Edwards. But yeah, Prince Patel got beat by Banquez by unanimous decision back in 2019. Yeah, Banquez, you know, looking at the two fighters, he does have a better resume against probably more live opponents. Both of his losses have been close unanimous decisions. Vargas, on the other hand, his only loss was a knockout defeat back in 2019. But since then, in my opinion, hasn't really fought many people of note since. So yeah, Vargas, Banquez, Elliot, how do you see this one going? Who do you make the favourite? Is it a good fight?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that introduction and that eloquent breakdown, as usual. And like you said, on two guys that actually may not be well known, even within boxing circles, let alone outside of boxing circles. When you first sent me this thing, this fight over, not to put blame on your door for selecting it as a pick, but we had the way it was given, it had Vargas as the A side, suggested A side. So I was having a look on the research. I was actually quite surprised looking at both their resumes, and like you say, actually, like. You look at Michel Basquez has fought liver opponents and comes into this. I mean, he's older, yes, like you said, there's an age difference here, but you know, he's fought. I mean, Cardenas 20-1, 8-0. Even for Patel, you know, some people like to say he's a figure of fun necessarily, but Lord Prince, the King Patel, everyone would call him 19-0-1 at the time. Whereas Vargas has been, you know, he's fighting guys at sort of 31-16, 16-37, 7-25. So looking at it that way, I was thinking surely this is going to be a Banquez win. I don't know how I was looking at it. So I'm still going with that way. I'm still going with a Banquez win, frankly, even though it is in the US and he's fighting a US fighter. I'm still going to go with that. And obviously, I'm looking at it as well, thinking Vargas. He's not been the distance. He's not been in a 10-round fight. He's been not 8 6-rounders. Banquez has been obviously in 12 10-rounders, 8-rounders as well. But I just got this feeling that everything on paper to me leaps out and says Michel Banquez should win this. Possibly, like you say, he's heavy-handed, 14 KOs and 20 wins, possibly by KO. Probably second half of the fight, somewhere 5-10 is what I would say. Do you agree with me, Paul? Or are we going to set our stall out and say from the first fight we're in disagreement?
We're not going to set our stall out right now and say that we're disagreeing, but I have a feeling we might do at the end of the end. At the end of the call, but no, I completely agree, mate. Banquez for me, I actually make him a clear favourite. I do make him a clear favourite. Totally agree with what you're saying as the stoppage as well. Maybe not blast him out of there early, but I could see it happening mid to late rounds. But yeah, I think it kind of did catch my eye. It's not a huge fight, in terms of name, I suppose, but it did kind of catch my eye, especially with Banquez being well enough known if you're a fan of the great Prince Patel. But we'll move on swiftly to our second fight. The traditional Saturday night boxing show from Minneapolis, which this is actually a world title fight. Elliot, IBF World Super Lightweight title is on the line here. Two names you probably have heard of in Subriel Matias and Jeremiah Ponce. So a quick tale of the tape as usual. Matias is 18-1. All of his victories have come by way of knockout. He's an orthodox fighter, 5'8", 71.5-inch reach, and he's from Puerto Rico. Jeremiah Ponce is 30-0, perfect record. 66.66666% of those victories have come by way of knockout. He's got 20 KOs in his 30 fights. He's 26 years old. He's from Argentina. He's also an orthodox fighter, but is a little bit taller at 5'11". So, yeah, I was just kind of a quick overview of the fighters' resumes as such. Matthias's only loss, he avenged with a sensational knockout. Um, he's a huge puncher at super lightweight, arguably one of the biggest. All of his fight wins have come by knockout. He clearly carries a huge dig. Um, and then since 2019, I think it's fair to say that Matthias's wins have been very credible. If you look at opponents on their records and stuff, all winning records, only one or two losses. Some undefeated fighters on there too. So yeah, he's clearly a good fighter and deserves a shot at the world title. Jeremiah Ponce, that'll probably be a name that kind of gets the cogs turning in the brains of British fight fans. Obviously, he came over and fought Lewis Ritson not so long ago, and he put on a bit of a masterclass that night. Was kind of beating Ritson convincingly before stopping him in the 10th round. It was incredibly one sided, and do you know what? For me, this fight is very intriguing. As a world title fight, I've got a follow up question I'm going to ask you after this, but yeah, just first and foremost, Elliot, how do you see this fight going? It is a good one for a world title.
I'll tell you what, Paul. I didn't even want to disturb you. That was a hell of a rundown, actually, and I actually agree with you. I think this fight's really intriguing. It's a good fight for me. This is probably the pick of the three, actually, we're going to discuss for me, in my opinion. Now, when I first looked at it again, to be honest with you, I'm struggling to call this. My gut was literally coming in with maybe Matthias. Like you say, he's beaten a couple of undefeated fighters. Credible resume, definitely from sort of 2020 onwards. Stopped everyone. Will he have that power? Will that power translate? Essentially, well, it will translate, but will he be able to land essentially on Ponce? And I looked through his record as well, and I'm going, not actually as credible necessarily than Matthias. Yes, like Ritson looks good on paper, but I think Ritson, it's fair to say, has not potentially lived up to what we expected him to live up to as British fight fans. So even though that looks a good victory, you can kind of pick holes in it as well. So I'm gonna put myself out on here and say it's gonna be Matthias win. Will he stop him? I mean, it'd be bold to say no. But yeah, I think he'll catch him at some point actually. And I think I don't see it being a blowout. I don't see it being early, but I see him potentially getting to him somewhere sort of 7 onwards. So that's how I see it. But I actually fully agree with you. I'm really intrigued by this fight, and for me, this is the fight of the weekend.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I'm going to ask you a follow up question in a minute before we then go on to obviously our last fight. But yeah, just for the record, I completely agree with you. I think it's looking at it on paper, I'm like, do you know what? This is such an intriguing matchup because obviously Matthias is all eyes are going to be at him and his punch power because he's finished every fight by knockout. But Ponce is no slouch, 20 knockouts, okay, against limited opposition, but he still clearly carries a dig. And although we know Lewis Ritson isn't gone on to be maybe a European or world level fighter that we thought he would be, he's a big puncher as well. At one stage, like was wiping out the British division in a few fights. So yeah, it's an interesting one. If I had to pick a winner, I'd probably just edge Matthias.
Oh, we're 2 for 2. We're 2 for 2 this week so far.
The follow up question I wanted to ask you was, I'm hoping you haven't looked at the betting odds for this fight. But if you were to guess, roughly, kind of price wise, what the two fighters would be, what would you say? Just out of curiosity.
I've got a feeling that Jeremiah Ponce is probably Bookie's favourite. I think he's ranked higher in the IBF. Is that right? I mean, I think these guys are obviously ranked 1 and 2, but I think he's number 1. So I would probably make him higher. I probably think that I actually reckon I probably favour a Ponce points victory if be the bookies' favorite pick there. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Well, I can tell you, Elliot, Greg, sir, that you are completely wrong. Believe it or not, Matthias is 2-9 to win.
Really?
Yeah, and Jeremiah Ponce is 3-1 to win. So
Wow.
very interesting. That jumped out at me.
Wow.
That's why I thought I would throw that curveball at you because
Let me
I
just
was thinking in my
let
head,
me just throw one back slightly, just because you're the man on the betting show here. Do you think that's great value to come in on Jeremiah Ponce there at 3-1? Is that something that would intrigue you?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And how would you go? Would you go KO method of victory for additional value, or would you reckon points? If you had to
If I
put,
was back in
give you a
Ponce, it
tenner,
would
give you a
probably.
crisp tenner, go and pull places where you like, baby. Where are you going to go?
Oh, ah, I still would back Matthias, but there's no value there. So yeah, I'd probably put it on a Ponce points win.
Yeah, well, I'm stunned at that. I am stunned at that. Like I am, especially there. That seems long. Um, for Jeremiah Ponce. But should we move on to the last of our three, Paul? Is it that
Yes,
time?
absolutely, absolutely. I believe you're going to take us through it in a few minutes here.
I'm going to take us through it, come off the long run here, and say that you've been to church on Sunday, whatever you've watched 4-2 per Sunday, you've watched whatever you've got to watch. But in the evening, we're going over to Saudi Arabia for some serious entertainment, and that is going to be Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury, which is a fight we've covered obviously in depth on the channel. We've done a deep dive look at it. Some prediction videos have also come out, but we're going to deal with it here as well and give it a kind of whistle stop, Paul. I think that's fair to say, isn't it? So let me just take you through again a bit of a tale of the tape. Both records as we like to do. Paul 6-0, 4 KOs, 26 years old. I suppose you can look at his CV. I have done previously his record and go. Anderson Silva stands out, possibly the best fight on both their records. Obviously, he's fought guys that kind of MMA guys crossing over. But again, no kind of criticism from him. Obviously, come late to the sport as well. He's fighting Tommy Fury, who's 8-0, 4 KOs, 23, so slightly younger. I suppose his recent victory is probably the most credible against 10-1 Daniel Bokiansky. But other than that, he's got the kind of CV you'd expect really from someone starting out at the beginning of his career. Not going to criticise it because frankly we see that's where boxers should be starting, frankly. In these sort of journeyman fighters. But Paul, what I'm going to say to you really here is we're going to have to do a prediction, Paul. We're going to have to have your prediction first and foremost. And then we're going to ask you before you warm up to that prediction, are these two do these represent the hardest opponent that each of them have faced so far for each other? That's the first question. Question two, do you expect it to be a stoppage or points victory? And who do you think will win, please?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I had quite a strong stance on this fight, and you know what? I really didn't like Jake Paul to start. Not saying I don't like him anymore, but he's kind of grown on me in a sense of fair play to him. He's he's done well and when he's had to. Um, yes, I think it's probably both of their toughest fights on paper. Suppose you could look at Anderson Silva being the toughest fight in general, but he was 40, what, 7. However, he had beaten former legitimate boxing world champion in Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. So yeah, it was a good win for Jake Paul. But do you know what? Just to kind of without dwelling on it too much, I think Tommy Fury is gonna batter him and win by knockout. So I know Greg and I talked about it on our betting show for this fight, but if you want to go and check that out. But now for me, Tommy Fury wins this fight by stoppage. I don't know if Jake Paul can take a shot. He might be able to, but I haven't seen that yet. And I know Fury hasn't looked brilliant, but there's too much riding on this for him to lose. He simply can't lose, in my opinion. So I don't think he will. I think he'll come out victorious in Saudi.
What did Meatloaf sing, Paul? 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and we were 2 out of 3 this week because I am going to also side with Gregory, and I am going to say Jake Paul. I mean, it's mostly heart. It's heart here rather than head, but I just purely for the reaction that would result if Jake Paul wins this. I'm kind of just urging that to be the result. I see Danny in one of our deep dive did say, and I'm going to agree with him here, concur with him, that he reckons it'll be a scrappy fight, sees it mostly actually coming down to kind of like the first couple of rounds might be a bit cagey, then it sees a lot of leaning essentially. Two guys be quite tired, and it could just come down either to fitness or which way the judges see it off that. I think it'd be quite a spoiling event for the last. So I actually see it being points one way or the other. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Tommy Fury wins, but equally I think it'll be a points, and I'd like to see Jake Paul win. That's where I'm sitting. Paul, you're sitting in the Fury camp. Fair play to you. I'm not going to criticise you for that at all. Like we said, 2 out of 3. Do you want to do the honours of giving us an outro here?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, another week, another preview from us. We'll be back next week with yet another and another. We haven't quite looked at the fights yet, so don't know off the top of my head what's coming up. But yeah, be sure to check out the rest of our content for Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, as well as everything else we've got up on the channel. And yeah, we'll be back next week. Elliot, once again, thanks very much.